church, we are carrying on with our Connect Group study where we are doing Project 20. We are looking at 1 Timothy chapter 1, and this week is all based off verse 4. Joining me today we have Megan, who is one of the young adult leaders, and we have Andy, who is one of the leaders at Woolwich. So let's get things started. 1 Timothy 1 verse 4 says that the people should not devote themselves to myths or genealogies. Those things, they create controversial matters, and it does not advance the kingdom of God. When you look at 2 Timothy chapter 2 verse 23, it talks about not harping or focusing in on those endless or pointless conversational pieces. So Andy, what do you think are conversational pieces or factors that the church talks about that aren't really important?
Well, on a general basis, anything that leads people away from Jesus, anything that doesn't promote people coming closer to Jesus. But I think the first thing that springs to mind is the perennial issue about whether everyone is saved or there is a limited amount. In other words, are you predestined, chosen by God, or aren't you chosen by God? And those kind of conversations, I don't think, promote the kingdom of God. It's not for us to be judge and jury. The commission that we've been given is to preach the gospel, and the kingdom of God will come as a result of that.
Yeah. Megan, what do you think?
I think the key word in what you read is devote, and like what you said about focusing. I think those aren't horrible things to touch on, because obviously they do need to be talked about, but how much time are you spending on that? Is that something that's creating division as you spend more and more time on it? Like, I think something we should be focusing on is like how well are you loving the people that you're having these conversations with, stuff like that. I think the key word is devote in that verse.
So Megan, why do we focus on those pointless conversational pieces?
I just think it can be easier for people. It's the easier thing to be able to talk about these things that are what ifs, and you can go on forever and ever talking about these things that we may never be able to wrap our heads around. Whereas the harder part might be to actually get in a conversation of like, why is that so important to you? Like, what about that is so crucial that you feel the need to debate it for hours and hours and hours on end with all these people, sometimes even making a fuss of it with people. Like what is going on in you that you feel the need to do that, I guess. That would be like the harder conversation to have. Yeah.
So Andy, let's say you're the person who is debating such things, how do you know when the issue at hand is a pointless conversation, it's not that important to the church?
I think there's two levels. I think, as friends, we can have a good old debate and a chin wag, and we know ultimately that we're going to, walk away friends. Yep. I think the real issue is when it causes controversies and division, and it actually brings the tone of the church down. I mean, Paul talks about the authority that God gave him to build people up. And I think that, if what we're saying is not building the church up, it's not building us up and the relationships around us, then I think we know that we're talking about pointless stuff. Yeah,
that's good. So then, based off that, Titus 3 verse 9 to 10 talks that we should avoid foolish disputes and that such things cause division. So Andy, what things should we be actually talking about?
What should we be focused on?
Yeah.
Well, it's really sort of gripped me recently how I mentioned the Apostle Paul again. I'm reading him at the moment, but a man of such great wisdom, such great authority and influence in the church, and when he's going to visit one of the biggest churches in the ancient world, i.e. the church at Rome, he says that his desire is to come to them to preach the gospel. I mean, they know the gospel, they are Christians, but his desire is to come and preach the gospel. And immediately, as soon as he said that, he launches in, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. And it's the power of God for the salvation of everyone who believes. Later in the letter, he talks about God has given me the priestly duty of proclaiming the gospel of Christ. So it just strikes me that, Paul's whole emphasis, despite of all he knows, is he sharpens it down to one point, and indeed, to the Corinthian church again, he says, when I came to you, I was determined to know nothing except Jesus Christ and him crucified. So I'm not saying that's all we need to talk about, but that has got to be the sharp end of what we talk about, and everything else comes in its wake. Yeah.
So Megan, what do you do that personally detracts rather than adds to the kingdom of God?
I think there's maybe two things I could say that just spring to mind is one, I think sometimes we let insecurities and things they come into our mind. I think we all have them, but I think sometimes you can choose whether or not that thought process like stays in the station like of your brain, or it like leaves. And I just think sometimes I might let that like dwell a little longer and let it like affect my behavior more than it should.
Yeah.
So I think that's a major one. But then another one I can definitely be battling is like, I've always just been somebody who like, I'm super visionary about like what I want in the future and how I'm gonna get there type thing, but that also like gets me to the spot of like where I'm constantly like worrying about the future and constantly like what do I need to do right now, all these different things. I'm like, we're like thinking about the future and not being as like present, which means I'm not able to be as like present with the people next to me or whatever. So I think those are two kind of big ones for me.
Today in Connect Group, let's study first form.